So Apple had their annual developers conference yesterday, the WWDC 2024. They talked about their new AI initiative. They talked about some new iOS features, new iPadOS features, new macOS features. It was a big software developers conference, and they talked about a lot of software. So I'm going to get into the most interesting things, or the things that I thought was the most interesting. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So I'm just going to go in chronological order with the presentation, all the while pointing out the key things that I thought were the most important. So first up, we have the VisionOS 2, where they talked about spatial video. And I thought that was interesting because they talked about a lot of pro aspects being brought to spatial video, not just it being recorded with your iPhone or the Apple Vision Pro. They talked about Canon creating a special lens for the EOS R7. They talked about special editing tools within Final Cut Pro, and they also talked about the videos being created with those tools being viewable on Vimeo. So I thought that was super interesting. They also talked about immersive video, and that was interesting to me for the same reason. They talked about bringing a lot of professional tools to immersive video. They talked about Blackmagic design tools, where I think they're going to be bringing some functionality to Blackmagic cameras, some functionality to DaVinci Studio, and of course, they're going to be adding some of this functionality to Apple Compressor. And they're also going to be adding some more immersive videos to the collection that they already have in the Apple Vision Pro. Next up, we have iOS 18, where the most interesting thing to me was when they talked about app locking. Super cool feature that's been in a lot of other phones, but you get to lock apps down individually now. And when you do that, not only does that lock the app from anyone else accessing it, it also locks that app's information from being accessed by the other apps in the phone or by the AI features that we're going to talk about later on in the presentation. Another cool thing with iOS 18 is that the Messages app gets scheduled messages, which I thought it already had, but apparently it didn't. So now, scheduled messages. Text effects, which I thought was very cool and interesting, where when you send a text message, you can designate certain words or the letters in words to do certain things like animate themselves, whether they bounce, whether they stretch, whether they jiggle or wiggle. It's very cool looking when you do it. And I think it's going to add a lot of functionality or emotion to text messages that just wasn't there before. Typically, I think these things are gimmicky, but this is one of those text messaging features I think is going to really catch on. So look out for that. Next, we have the Wallet app, where tap to cash is becoming a thing. So this tap to cash feature that they're adding is a direct payment of Apple Cash from one iPhone user to another one. And essentially how you use it is you just tap two iPhones together, just like the tap to exchange contact information. And I think there's going to be some kind of confirmation that goes on, obviously, so you're not just sending random people money. But I thought that was a very cool feature that I think is going to take off for paying people with cash, just like Cash App has taken off. I think this is going to be a really nice alternative to that for people who want to exchange money more privately, I guess. Next up, we have some home features, where I thought they lumped AirPods into the home section. I'm not sure why. I guess it kind of makes sense. But AirPods has a new feature I think is really cool, and I may want to pick up me a pair of the new AirPods for this particular feature alone, which is accepting and declining calls. You can nod to accept the call or nod no to decline a call. They showed a guy in the elevator, a quiet elevator, and he got a call come in. He had his AirPods in, and he was able to decline the call because he didn't want to have to talk in that kind of private setting on the elevator, which I thought was amazing. That was a very cool feature that I'm surprised no one came up with before now, but there you go. The Apple TV also got an interesting feature, which is contextual subtitles. This works like when you're watching a movie and a part comes by that you didn't hear, and you hit the person on the couch next to you, like, what did they just say? And they're like, I don't know what they just said. So you rewind it and you listen for that part again, and you didn't hear it again because it was too low. Well, this will caption that section of the movie that you just rewound because it assumes you want to hear it or see that part again. So as it's replaying it, it'll also show you the subtitles. I think that's awesome. Another feature that came to the Apple TV is the 21:9 aspect ratio, which I know is going to make a lot of movie buffs go wild. So good on you, Apple. WatchOS 2 got a few interesting updates. Training mode got an effort rating, which I thought was very interesting. I like it when you can get motivation from wherever you get it, right? But just having that bit of motivation from seemingly some kind of assistant on the watch that knows all of your health metrics and can know and knows where you're lacking, and maybe could give you some motivation or some helpful tips in those areas along the way and along the day. That is super helpful. They have a new Vitals app that offers new health metrics, alerts, and contextual health info. They have Smart Stacks, which I thought was cool. It's kind of like how the Pixel has that bottom row that will populate with the apps it thinks you're going to use, or it knows that you use behaviorally throughout the day at certain times. So it'll just present those apps to you at those times of the day with the intent of that's what you're going to be using. So let's just give that to you, serve it up to you on the home screen. But I think that's cool. It doesn't work well all the time, but when it does work, it's really cool. So it's nice to see they offer that functionality in the Apple Watch. Next up is iPadOS 18, where there was a couple things I thought was interesting there. First being Share Play, where you know how you've got a question from your friend who says, how do you do this on my phone? Or a family member calls you saying, how do I do this on my phone? Where now you can not only share your screen, but you can draw on the screen and that will show up on the other person's screen. You kind of like draw directions of what you want them to be doing, or maybe draw an arrow to the button you want them to hit or the setting you want them to go into. And they can see that on screen. It's just kind of a better representation of how to go about doing something or showing someone how to do something on their phone. I think that's very cool. The calculator app has come. Man, I know a lot of iOS or iPadOS users have been waiting for this. Their reasoning, though, I'm not sure what that reasoning is, but at least their implementation of this is a very good implementation of it. So the calculator app works with Apple Pencil now, so it does math equations and even works with variables. So I saw a demonstration to where they were just handwriting equations on the screen, and as soon as you put the equal sign there, you would get the answer. A lot has to depend on how it's converting and how well you're writing, I would imagine, right? There's definitely got to be some conversion going on in the background. And it's using AI to obviously do the math, but AI is notorious for not really handling math all that well, from my experience. And then you put in the complexity of converting whatever someone's writing into something that the computer can understand. Because it's not just regular text. There's a lot of things that have to work really well for this to work, but the demonstration looked like magic. It was very awesome. They also have something called Math Notes, where it does live calculations and responds to changing variables on the fly. They did a demonstration of that, where they had a equation on the screen and they just changed the value of a variable, and that changed the whole outcome of what was happening on the screen. It was very impressive. Students are going to love this. I would have loved it as a student. It also shows you a graph when you add y equals to any equation, essentially making any equation or turning any equation into a function. Awesome. I would have loved that going through calculus, man. Having that visual representation at any moment with something that you can have right at your desk, man, kids don't know how good they got it these days. Also, this Math Notes function works in the Notes app. So there you go. I mean, it's probably going to start working in a lot of other places too, but that's a good start. And it's a very good demonstration. I definitely encourage you to go take a look at that if you haven't seen it. Now, along with this handwritten math equations, they've also upped the game for their handwriting recognition. So they have something they call Smart Script, where it improves the handwriting experience. They showed a demonstration to where they sat the pen down on the screen and it just moved the other words out of the way so it could put something there. It was very cool. You can paste handwriting, or you can paste text into a handwritten note. It'll change that text to your handwriting. They also showed to where your handwriting gets transformed into a more legible, more clearly read form of your handwriting. And it's a bit more than what e-ink tablets like this Note Air 3C does, to where it does anti-aliasing on the script that you write, just to kind of smooth out the curves. This looks like it does something altogether different. It looks like what Apple is having the program do is take what you wrote, match it up with a database of characters that they have in their system, and matches it to what most closely fits what it looks like you wrote, right? So it's not only going to convert it in the background to an actual text letter, it's also going to match it up with a font that looks the closest to what you wrote as your handwriting. So And a better way to say that is your handwriting will be converted into text and then matched with a font that looks closest to your handwriting. So, and then they're going to present you with that font. So all your handwriting will be essentially be converted to a font that is a text font. That's what I think is happening. And even though that's what I think is happening, I still think it's impressive. I still think it's an ingenious way to even handle that, right? But it's going to be a boon for people who want to do handwriting on the iPad like myself. I'm always looking for better ways to get my handwriting done. So ink is the way I do it right now, but I'm definitely going to give the iPad a good look with these new handwriting features they have. They also have something I love this Books product for, which is the scribble function. So you can scribble a word out on this screen and have it disappear. You can do the same thing on the new iPad with the new iPadOS 18 with this new, I'm not sure if it's a handwriting app specifically or if it's like happening in just Notes. It looked like it was happening just in Notes, which would make sense, but I could be wrong about that. But that scribble to erase functionality reminded me of what they did with the Newton years ago. It looks like they're bringing some of that functionality to the iPad finally. I'd be interested to see how this plays out as the years go by and they keep adding the functionality, especially with that new Nano Etch screen that a lot of people thought should feel better for writing or would add some friction to the writing surface. I went to the Apple Store and I did a short in the Apple Store just writing on that screen, and it didn't feel any different. I compared it to the screen that didn't have the Nano Etch technology or the Nano Etch display. And I did it on the screen that had the Nano Etch display, and it felt exactly the same. It did help with glare though. The glare was definitely improved on the Nano Etch display over the one that was not Nano Etched. All right, so next up we have macOS Sequoia is what the new naming is going to be. And basically it brings all of the features that we talked about iPadOS and iOS to the Mac as well. A couple notable features though would be the iPhone mirroring, which I thought was very cool. If your iPhone is in another room, you can call up your iPhone on your Mac and it'll show a representation of your iPhone with your home screen, all the apps in the same place. They would be there. Everything acts the same. Notifications act the same. So it's just your iPhone virtually on your Mac. It's very cool. So they added a new feature to Safari that I thought was interesting. So Safari has always had Reader, which basically once you click the Reader button on a web page, it gets rid of all the advertisement, the sidebar, and all that stuff and just leaves you with the article. Very cool. I use it a lot. They also added now what they call Viewer. So it basically gets rid of everything from around videos and just leaves you with the video. Advertisers won't like that, but very interesting for consumers. They also showed gaming, but it's a Mac, so who cares? So Apple finally showed off their AI strategy, which involves a lot of their own on-board AI, which is, I'm sure, what they'd rather be using. And then they showed and displayed their integration with ChatGPT. So we're going to go over the most notable points in that presentation. So the first thing we have is actions, where they have automated actions that learn through behavior. Does that sound familiar? The Rabbit R1 is going to basically be defunct now because Apple is integrating all of that functionality. I mean, that the Rabbit R1 is built for. They're building that right into the iPhone. And they're also giving you a platform to make your own actionable scripts. They're using something called Apple Intents Framework for actions. And that's essentially going to let you do your own actions, maybe let developers create their own actions. And their AI is going to learn over time, so it's going to be able to just have a couple baked in actions already. It sounds like with their AI approach, Apple's going to globally accessible information on the iPhone, whereas typically what you have is walled off apps. Like your Uber app is not going to talk to your Mail app, which is not going to talk to your, I don't know, your word processing app. But how they're doing things now with their new AI strategy, it seems like all of your information is going to be pooled and it be globally accessible by any app, or at least globally accessible by the AI, which has access to any app. So in so facto, global information, which I think is what's happening. They did that on the Newton years back, and I think that's kind of the approach they're taking here with kind of aggregating all of your information for the sake of the AI. We have AI with Siri, or Siri AI. It comes to macOS, iOS, and iPadOS. A lot of notable features about that, but I'm going to touch on a few. One feature they talked about with the AI on the iPhone would be the ability to ask your phone questions about how to use the phone. It seems like such a simple thing, right? But man, that might be the most ingenious use of AI I've ever seen. It's helping you do something that you would probably be asking a friend, trying to search online for, when now all of that stuff will be right on device, accessible to you through text or voice command. It's so simple and so awesome. They have Siri being on-screen aware, so Siri knows what you have on screen, what you're viewing on screen, what you're reading, so it can give you contextually valid information. They have the app intents framework like we talked about just a second ago. We have in-app actions like we talked about just a second ago. We have editing pictures. So now you can just kind of naturally speak to Siri and say, lighten that picture or add a bit of magenta to that picture, bro. She might understand that. It also adds personal context to things you're adding because it has access to all of your information. Like I said, I think the AI has global access to information where it can go to any app and get information that it thinks is relevant to the response it needs to give you. So that information will be pulled from your contact list, your email, all of those places. So it knows a lot about you already. And from what I understand, it can just pull that information and give you the most valid piece of true information because it's getting it from you. So it should be light on the hallucinations when it gives you an answer, theoretically. But we'll see how it works. I think that's the right approach, especially if you're going with the security approach that Apple is definitely taking. They went through links to make sure everyone understood throughout the presentation of all the security measures they're taking to keep your data safe and that they're not sharing it with anyone and that all of these calculations for AI is happening on device for the AI intelligence, for the Apple intelligence portion of it. Later on, they get into talking about what happens when they need AI to reach out to the internet, and they've partnered with OpenAI for that portion of the calculations when it needs to go to online servers. And during this time, they made sure everyone knew that you're going to have to confirm your information being shared whenever your information leaves the device and goes to the cloud for a response to be returned back. So you will know that, you'll have to accept it, and I think that's cool as well, especially for a company who banks on security as much as Apple does. So AI productivity. During this whole section, it essentially was Apple bringing features that everyone's gotten used to, the generative AI tools that everyone's gotten used to who's used ChatGPT in the past. If you've used Google Bard or Gemini, you are used to these things already, and they're just kind of like bringing their tools up to par. So they're bringing the rewrite, they're bringing all those AI features that we're all used to seeing in our mail clients. We have an image wand in Notes to where it can use sketches that you've made and make a image based on that sketch and kind of generate something that looks like it, but more professional like. Super cool right there. And if you don't have an image in your document, it can take the surrounding information in that document and kind of generate an image based on that. So that was very cool for image generation. The Photos app, again, a lot of generative AI tools we've seen in other photo editing tools. And lastly, they talked about their integration with OpenAI and ChatGPT 4o. And basically, like I said, they're going to be using ChatGPT when it comes to anything internet related. So when you would ask Siri, Siri, blah, 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 and Siri would say, hey, here's a link on the internet. Now Siri will be able to go to the internet and get you relevant information and bring it back to you. And Apple's going to do that using OpenAI's tools in ChatGPT 4o. All right, everyone, those are all the interesting things I thought happened in WWDC 2024. I hope you enjoyed the little summary. Hope you got something from it. If you did, go ahead and like. If you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe. And until next time, take care.